meet David.
I wanted to do this quick video for you. We talked like a little while ago about this amazing opportunity.
Now I'm still not quite sure what David's job is. It's quite complicated. But what I do know is David spent the better part of a year trying to make his space look as good as it possibly can when he's talking on these Zoom meetings.
Hi there, I'm David Shadbolt.
After watching one of my lighting videos on YouTube, David reached out and asked for some help. He emailed me saying he had an Elgato Keylight Air, Viltrox LED bi-color lights, a few Ulanzi mini RGB lights, 2 garden RGB lights. He's thinking about getting a cob light. He also had the Sony ZV-1, the Sony ZV-E10 with a Sigma 16mm 1.4 lens, and a G85 Lumix. And he asked me to travel to his home and really make the most out of the kit that he had. As some of you may know, I'm really interested in this. I love helping other creators, and the fact that I get to do it in person makes it all that much sweeter. David did pay me for my time, but I think the improvement was definitely worth it. You could go and spend £500 on a new lens and hope that that's going to solve your problems, or you could find somebody to help you, pay them instead, and you're probably going to end up with a better result. So I'd agreed. And the first thing I wanted to do was get to know David. I wanted to understand the look he was trying to get and why he was trying to get it. I asked David to show me around his space, and he's essentially working in a spare bedroom. And I asked him, does this room get used as a bedroom very often? To which the answer was no. And I thought, right, I can see what's happened here. You've moved into this spare bedroom trying to keep it as a spare bedroom and cramming yourself into not really the optimal corner of this space. Sometimes all you need is for someone to ask you why you're doing things a certain way in order for you to stop and think about what you're doing. So I said, right, let's flip it on its head. Where else could this bed go in this room where it could still be accessible to anyone who needed to use it, but opened up a lot more space to you? Let's change this space from a spare bedroom that you work out of to an office with a spare bed in it. David showed me a couple of videos that he'd made in the past, and to be honest, I didn't think they looked too bad. There's definitely room for improvement, but it's a solid setup if you're just looking for generic Zoom meetings. But David wasn't happy with this look. He wanted it to look more professional. He wanted his space to absolutely pop out of that screen. And he had mostly the right equipment, he just didn't know how to put the puzzle pieces together to make the final picture. I found out later that David actually had a load more kit that he hadn't even told me about, such as a Rodecaster Pro, an A10 Mini, a capture card. He had everything he needed other than a good key light. And the key light was one of my main issues with David's original setup, because he was looking directly at the camera and he had a monitor directly below that camera and he had the light directly above that camera. All of the lighting on his face was relatively flat. Now you'll know from watching my other videos that I always suggest having the light off to the side so we get a nice bright side of the face and a darker portion of the face. I knew that adding a hair light to the back of David would really make him pop out of that frame, but I still wasn't really convinced that he was sat in the best position in that room. So I went and used my trusty Google SketchUp to see where else that bed could fit. I asked David to send me the dimensions of the room that he was working in, and I started playing with things, moving his desk around, moving the bed around, seeing where things would fit, and I finally settled on this design. I had another meeting with him, I showed him the designs and he loved it. He was like, yep, spot on. So he started moving his room around that evening and doing essentially what I had done virtually in real life. I also said to David, I think you need a new key light. That Elgato panel just doesn't have the guts. So he went away and he bought the Amran 200X, which after playing with it is an amazing cob light. In the end, David actually settled for a slightly different layout to the one that I'd done in my 3D design, but I thought, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. He's happy with this. Let's see if we can make it work. We hadn't settled on the diffuser that we were going to be using with that cob light. It was either going to be a big softbox or a lantern, and I took both with me when I went to see him. But we started with the camera placement, which is always the first step. You don't want to be lighting a subject before the camera's in the right place because you want something to look at and reference when you're moving lights around. Now I had an idea for that camera placement. I wanted it to be directly in front of David so you could see his desk and you could see the surrounding areas as well. And David only had a 16mm 1.4 lens, so I took a couple of other lenses with me, and eventually we settled on the Sigma 30mm 1.4. This was mounted to his Sony ZV-E10, which I have to say I'm a big fan of after spending the day using it, and I'd say it was about 3 or 4 feet in front of him. Now apologies, I didn't film more of us actually setting this up. I wish I had, but I didn't. I did take a couple of pictures, but you're just going to have to use your imagination a little bit. So the camera settings that we actually settled on was the aperture was set at 1.8, the ISO was at 100, and the shutter speed was set to 1/50th. And like I said, David had an A10 Mini and he also had a capture card, but when we started plugging the camera into those devices, we started losing frames quite dramatically. But something that the ZV-E10 can do is you can plug it directly in via USB and use it as a webcam. And when we did this, the footage looked amazing, and now I really want one in my life. So once we had a clear feed coming from the camera to the laptop, we started playing with lights. And like I always say, you start with your key light, then you add your hair light, and then you introduce some practicals. And we started with the Amaran 200X, which is essentially like having a miniature sun. We closed all the curtains so we weren't getting any spill from any other lights. We just wanted to see what the light was like from the Amaran. And we started off with a 60cm Godox lantern, which I just happened to already own. David told me that he really wants a bright, open, airy space, and I knew that using a lantern, that light would spill out over the rest of the room, creating what he was looking for. We tried the softbox as well, but he wasn't so keen on the shadows and the contrast on the side of his face. He wanted an inviting space that he can welcome his participants into. After moving that light around a little bit, we found the optimum position. It was just off to his right-hand side, about 6 foot high, and just pointing down ever so slightly. David really wanted to get as much stuff off the ground as he possibly could, so he is going to be mounting that to a newer arm at some point in the future, but for the time being, it's on a light stand. The next thing I wanted to do was introduce a hair light to see what difference it made. And coincidentally, David actually had a little metal L bracket up in the corner of the room that he used to use to hang a backdrop. And literally, it was in the perfect spot. The only problem we had was getting power to it. So after some creative bodgery, we managed to mount one of my SL60Ws up into that corner, and the cable ran through the cupboard and into an extension lead. This wasn't a permanent solution, but it gave us an idea whether it would actually work or not. And as soon as we turned that key light on, we knew it was going to work, and we knew that David was going to be really happy. He was thinking about buying the Amaran 60X because you can control it all on an app. You can control every single light in your frame on an app, and he already had one Amaran. He's subsequently gone with exactly what I put up there, the Godox SL60W. We were happy with how this looked. It was really starting to come together, but something that I saw David was so keen on in his old setup was the use of colored LEDs. I myself am also a fan of RGB, but I think you can overdo it. I see quite often when people just chuck as much RGB light at a scene as they possibly can in order to distract you from what else is going on in that scene. But I didn't want to do this with David. Keep it simple and it'll look so much better. I also owned an Amaran P60C, which is a big, very powerful LED panel. And what we ended up doing was just resting it on the bed that was behind his shelves that he'd put in place and firing it at that brick wallpaper. As soon as we turned it on, we were like, yep, that's the look. Perfect. The great thing about the Amaran P60C is you can change the color on the app. You can change the intensity. You can change how bright it is. It gives you so much more flexibility than just having a couple of smaller panels. Now again, David held out on me. He had quite a few different options for sound. He had the Rodecaster Pro, he had a Rode Wireless Go 2, and he also had a Samsung USB microphone. And I was really shocked at the quality of just the internal mic on his MacBook. It was doing a phenomenal job. But after quite a lot of back and forth, we decided that the Samsung was the best sounding microphone out of everything.
Chris. What can I say about Chris? I can say that he climbs behind you when you're trying to do something, which is a bit annoying. But other than that, oh my goodness, look at this amazing lighting that we've got today. I can't imagine what everyone is thinking at home. You just must be so stunned by the quality that we're getting today.
And as long as he stayed close enough to the microphone, it was going to be a great option. So after a bit of trading back and forth, David actually ended up keeping my Sigma 30mm 1.4. I took his 16mm 1.4, which is actually what I'm shooting on right now. He kept the Amran panel and I took the Rodecaster Pro. He kept a few other little knickknacks of mine, but we both walked away really happy. And this is the end result.
Okay guys, I'm here to tell you, don't whatever you do, work with Chris Watkins. Chris will ruin your life. He will ruin your life, I'm telling you. He will make everything look so good that you won't ever leave your studio. You just won't do it. Look at this. Look at what he's done. He has totally transformed my setup. Not content. Chris was not content with even doing it so that in the existing setup. No, he had to change the whole setup. He reversed the room, he moved this, he moved that. I just want to tell you some of the things I didn't like. I couldn't work out my way with cameras. I was giving up on cameras. Secondly, my lighting. I didn't realise I had to have a super bright light in this room. Chris helped me to work that out. He just managed to make it look really good. He is totally precious about detail, so even now as I'm doing this, I've probably done something wrong that he'll complain about because I've not got everything quite absolutely right. But the lighting, the camera, everything was wrong. The perspectives, everything was wrong, and he's just totally transformed it.
I was absolutely over the moon with how this looked, and I think David was as well. The next day, David had quite an important event and he wanted me to just do a little AV check before he went live. And I joined him on my end and I looked at his setup and I was so jealous. I was like, oh my God, I need to go away and rework my space. All in all, I think we both walked away from that experience really happy. If you've got a similar problem to David, then please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to have a chat with you. Let me know what you think of his setup in the comment section below. I'm sure he's going to be watching and commenting and replying to you all. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you again really soon.